Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is the 7 books I read in March. March was a decent reading month for me. Like 7 books is not as much as I used to read, but I found a new favourite and I had another strong, solid 4-star read as well. So I call that a good month. Should I start with the worst or the best books? I'm going to be chaotic and choose the worst. Or least favourite, not the worst, because I didn't think there was anything objectively wrong with these books. It's just not for me. Starting with Where the Dark Stands Still, unfortunately, which I gave 2 stars or 2.5 stars. I tried to read this last year around this time and I DNF'd it, but it was a soft DNF because I thought I should like this book and maybe I was just in a reading slump at the time, which I kind of was. So I put it to the side after about 90 pages, but I attempted to read it again and I did get all the way through, but I just did not enjoy myself at all. This is a YA fantasy standalone, and I've seen people compare it to like Howl's Moving Castle, which I do see, but it wasn't exactly what I imagined. But this book is basically set in a world where magic is forbidden and frowned upon, and the main character does actually have magical abilities, which she is keeping secret from everyone because she knows she'll face judgment. And actually, some of her family members already know about it and have tried to basically exorcise the powers out of her. But after an incident, she becomes desperate and flees to the woods. And the demon warden of the woods finds her and offers her a bargain where he can take away her powers if she serves him in his manor for a year. And honestly, my main problem with this book is I just found it kind of boring. I don't mind character driven books if the characters are entertaining, and to me, they weren't really in this. I thought the main character was quite bland, and I didn't really care about the love interest either. There's also something about the writing style, which I didn't realise until maybe 100 pages in, and then I clocked it, and that's it's third person but present tense, which was just frying my brain a little bit. I'm just used to the character speaking in past tense, like I did this or she did this, but it was she wakes up instead of she woke up, and I don't know why, it was just confusing me so much. It really took me out of the story. Not an objectively bad thing about the book, it was just a personal preference, but yeah, unfortunately this one didn't work for me. I also read The Scholar and The Last Fairy Door, and this is another one I was so disappointed that I didn't love because I had such high expectations. It sounded like a lot of things I love in a book. It's dark academia, it has fairies, and I discovered I love fae books when they're not your stereotypical romantasy books. I like fae books where the fae are not sexy guys with pointy ears and they're actually like creatures. Fae that's based more on folklore than romantasy fae. That is one of these books, but yeah, I just didn't love it. It's another character driven book where not much happens, but yet again, the characters to me were so bland. There's 4 main characters and you only get one point of view, and the main character who you do, her name's Clover. She was the most boring out of them all, so that was unfortunate. And also the pacing was really weird. I don't mind a slow build, but this was not a slow build. This was just slow for 250 pages and then chaotic for another 150. It was just all over the place, and I was so bored throughout the first half that when the action started, I just didn't care anymore. I also read Tales of the Celestial Kingdom and gave it 3 stars, and this is also just a personal preference thing. I don't typically love short story collections. I do enjoy them, but I can't really love them because it's rare for me to like love every single story. And also I just prefer long stories. Like it's just not enough. Like I think these are 30 pages max, and it's just not enough for me to get invested, even though it is about characters who I really cared about from the initial duology. I just didn't really get much out of this, but it was well written and we got some extra information and stuff, so I did give it a 3. And also, it's a quick read, so it didn't take too much time. I also read The Rose Bargain, and I feel really conflicted in this one of whether or not I enjoyed it because it was entertaining and I did like the twist at the end, which is making me want to pick up the sequel. But at the same time, I didn't really enjoy the bulk of the book and it just read a little too young to me, which I don't blame the book for. It's a YA book, but it's one of the YAs where I just don't connect with anymore. This is pitched as like Pride and Prejudice meets The Selection, which I do agree it's like a historical fantasy version of The Bachelor basically. But it's set in England in the Victorian era, I think, and the Queen of England is basically a fae queen, and she's offering up her fae son, like offering up his hand in marriage, and basically these 6 girls, including the main character, are competing against each other to win his heart basically. But the Fae Prince's human brother actually pulls the main character aside and basically tells her how corrupt the queen is and how much he wants to overthrow her. And to do that, he needs her, the main character. I think her name is. What's her name? Ivy. Shows how much she just wasn't that special. But he says the only way to overthrow the queen is to get Ivy to marry the Fae Prince. Basically gives her all this advice and tactics to win his brother's heart. And I just found the bulk of this book quite boring. The setup was interesting, and I think the twist at the end, whilst I didn't predict it, but it didn't shock me in any way. It felt like a typical YA romanticy twists. If you really tried, you could see it coming. It did make me interested in reading the sequel, but the bulk of this book to me was just quite boring. I wasn't that interested. I think I'm going to give it a 3.5. Yeah, I'll see how I feel when the sequel comes out and what the reviews are like, and maybe that will determine if I read it or not. Another book I read in March was Jane Eyre, and I gave this 4 stars. I talked about it in detail in my reading vlog that I posted most recently. But I really enjoyed this. For a classic as well, it's pretty easy to read. I said in the vlog that it felt almost timeless because the writing style, whilst it did read older, like the way the characters spoke to each other is not how people these days would speak, but it almost felt like it was a historical fiction written today, but like in a good way. So yeah, it just feels really timeless. But this basically follows the main character, Jane Eyre, and it just follows her life story, her early life story, from her childhood, which basically she grew up with her aunt and her cousins, and they were just really horrible to her. So she gets sent to boarding school, and that is really rough as well. They're really horrible to her there as well. But then after she graduates, she becomes the governess of this manor and basically teaches or tutors one of the little girls living there. And then the man who owns the house, Mr. Rochester, they basically fall in love. Even though I did not like him, he was a piece of work. I really enjoyed this. I was entertained throughout. The only reason I didn't give it 5 is just I didn't really connect with it, and then also just some of the ways it was written, it was so long. Her and Mr. Rochester were having a conversation, and it was an important conversation, but it lasted like at least an hour of my audiobook. It was so long, but I just did drag at parts. But overall, I did really enjoy the story. The book I read most recently was Sunrise on the Reaping, which is the new Hunger Games book. It's the prequel. So if anyone doesn't know what the Hunger Games is, it's set in a dystopian America where basically after a revolution, the country is separated into districts, and to basically punish the districts for revolting, they host an annual Hunger Games tournament where they take 24 kids and basically make them fight to the death, and there can only be one victor. Pretty brutal. And Haymitch is one of the mentors of the main characters in the original trilogy, and in this prequel just follows his games that he was the victor of. I gave this 4 stars or 4.5 stars. I thought it was really entertaining. I liked learning about Haymitch's backstory. It was also really heartbreaking. I felt it did have some new things to offer to the Hunger Games universe, like its commentary on censorship, because it's not something that was explored that much in the initial trilogy. But basically, we find out in Haymitch's games, a lot of things happen, like unsavory things. Not that the whole concept isn't unsavory, but certain things don't happen the way they should. Like the capital doesn't really follow all the exact rules in Haymitch's games. So, for example, the children are picked for the games completely randomly, like their names are drawn out of this bowl thing. But for Haymitch, his name wasn't even drawn. It was another guy who tries to escape, and then they kill him as he's trying to escape. And then Haymitch gets involved in a kind of brawl that erupts as a result of this guy getting killed. And then to punish Haymitch for standing up to the peacekeepers, he basically gets dragged into the games, even though his name wasn't pulled out. But then in the televised version of the games, they basically refilmed the scene. Like they faked him getting his name pulled out and basically cut out the part where they just killed a random guy for trying to escape. So they did that a lot throughout the book, where certain things would happen that made the government or the capital look bad, and then they edited it out of the final showing of the games. I do think that was something new that the author was adding to the universe, but in my opinion, it did feel a bit repetitive of the first Hunger Games book. It was following a lot of the similar plot points, like the reaping day and then the actual reaping, and then traveling to the capital, and then all the preparation that you have to do before the games, and then the games themselves, and then the aftermath. It was just hitting very similar plot points to the first book, and then even bits of Catching Fire and Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So that's my only gripe with this book, and it made me realise I don't want another book about someone else's games, like Phoenix games or something like that. I'm not that interested. But I would be interested in a prequel, like a prequel to the prequels about the actual revolution, and the first games are like the setup of the games. That could be interesting. I don't think another character's games would be that necessary. And finally, my favourite book in March, which I've talked about in my reading vlog, it's Upon a Starlit Tide, and I absolutely love this, and it's a new favourite. This is a adult fantasy standalone. It's historical and it's set in the 1700s in France, and it's a Little Mermaid and Cinderella retelling. And you can really tell, especially at the start of the book, Cinderella is like very obviously an inspiration for this. But then it becomes its own thing near the end of the book, which I really appreciated. But it follows the main character, and she's the stepdaughter of a wealthy ship merchant family in the north of France. And basically, her sisters are kind of really interested in balls and finding a husband and stuff like that. But she wants to explore the seas, basically. And she has this friend, Samuel, who's a privateer from England, and he basically teaches her how to sail. Then one day, a guy washes up on the shore of her house at the beach. Basically, he's been in a shipwreck and she saves him. And it turns out he is the son of another wealthy ship merchant family. A little love triangle ensues after that. Yeah, the book is basically about the main character gaining her freedom. And I just absolutely loved her. I was rooting for her the entire time. And there were certain things that happened at the end which I was very, very happy about. And just overall, I love this book. It's nearly 500 pages, it's 400 something pages, and I was not bored once throughout, and I already want to reread it. I just loved the magic in this world and how subtle it was as well, but it was so beautiful, and it was very like fairy tale esque, and I just loved it so much. And I like how mermaids were represented in this as well, because there's a lot of misconceptions that humans have of mermaids. Like, for example, they think that mermaids are really vain in this because they're always looking in their little mirrors. They have handheld mirrors, and the human men think that they're really vain because they're always staring at their reflection. But actually, the main character finds out that when a mermaid looks in the mirror, she can see like the past, present, and future in it. So that's what they're actually looking at, not themselves. And it's just little things like that I found really magical. But yeah, I absolutely love this. That's the 7 books I read in March. I think that's a pretty good reading month, to be honest. I had at least 3 or 4 really enjoyable reads, and then a new favourite as well. So that is all I ask for. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or if you want to read them, or if I've convinced you to read them, because I've been ranting and raving about Upon a Starlit Tide for a few weeks now. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this video.